everybody, it's Claire here from Sewing by Claire, and today we're on to the next part in our video Sewalong series for making Clara the cat. And this is this character here. And so far we've completed our very cute head and we've done all the facial features for that. And we're now actually going to be moving on to the body. So Clara is a kit by Lilly Dolls, and Clara the cat is actually part of the Apple Blossom Woodland Collection, and they have been designed by Claire and Richard. And they are very kindly sponsoring this kit because they provided me the video because they provided me with a kit. So that's what I'm using now to make Clara, and I'm really enjoying the process. A little challenging in places, but hopefully I've given you some tips and tricks of how to work with the kit and to work with the pattern and the felt. And today we're going to work on the body so that we've got something to attach our head to. So that's our next stage. So I'll tilt the camera down and we'll get started. So if I just take you back to when we were cutting out our felt, we cut out all of our body parts all at the same time so that we knew that we got enough felt to be able to finish the whole project. And we did that when we were tracing everything off before we got to the point of actually cutting anything out, just to make sure. So if you want to pop back to the previous parts, then you'll get to the part where we actually cut out all of the felt. So we're just going to take the two body pieces today, and we've got those held together, and both have got the sewing line drawn on that with heat erasable ink from a Frixion pen or from a pen like this one here, which is a Uniball erasable, gel erasable pen. And that works really well, I've found. Just test it on a piece of scrap fabric first, just to make sure that that ink is going to come out. But we're actually using it on the inside of our felt as well, so it's not on the outside, so that's always good. So let's get our body piece, which we're going to be working with. And the first thing we're going to do is look for the two marks for the opening on the back of the character, where we've got those lines to keep it open. And I'm going to use my red pin trick. Now this is a trick that I use to help me remember to start and stop, because we want to leave that little gap opening for turning this through. So I'm going to use a red headed pin or red topped pin to go through the first side and then locate that same point on the other side of my other piece of fabric for the other body, and come through right on that point just there, and then take a stitch really into the felt. And then I'm now going to go through on the other mark, and this is assuming that you drew those marks accurately in the same place from your pattern, which we should have done. And then we've got another stitch there. So those red pins now will tell me that I need to start and stop at those 2 points. Now when I'm using other pins now, just put a few randomly around so that we can just get these two sides of the felt together. So again, right on that stitching line, the pin's going in, and then it's coming out on the stitching line of the other piece. Make sure they're nice and flat together. We've got some lovely shaping, haven't we, around this character to give her a lovely definition. And again, so I'm just putting a few pins just randomly around the outside now of the character so that we can start and stitch this together. It'll just start and hold it together for us whilst we're tacking it. So again on the bottom there, and they're practically on top of each other, so that's fine. Okay, so that's where I am. I've got my two red pins there, and then I've got other pins just around the other sides just to hold them together. Let me get my tacking thread ready. So I'm going to use my yellow tacking thread and a sewing needle, and we're just going to tack these two pieces together. Okay, so I've got my knot at the end of my thread, and we're all ready to get going. And I'm going to start from this one of these red pins, and I'm just going to go straight through on that pin and make sure that I come out on the stitching line, because we want to keep this shaping as perfect as possible, don't we? I'm just going to now go back in on the line and then make sure I'm coming out on the line of the stitch in this side, that drawn line. And as I said to you in earlier videos when we were stitching our head, this does go quicker, doesn't it, the more that you do it. I'm off the lines there slightly. So let's get back on the line again. I want those lines to be exactly on top of each other. And I'm just using a stab stitch just backwards and forwards just to tack these together. And we found that just pulling a little bit of pressure on the thread actually helps too, to hold and keep those threads, those two sides of the felt nicely together. Just got a knot in my thread. That's it. I'm just going to keep going all the way around this character, just making sure that both times I'm stitching, and I'm going in and going out, both of those lines are absolutely on top of each other. Let me just bring this closer to you when I've untangled it. So that's how my stitches are looking, just here. And on the other side, they're absolutely on those lines. So you don't need to see me do this because you've seen this happen before. And I'm just going to keep on going backwards and forwards, making sure that they're all lined up until I'm all the way round to my other red pin, and then I'll do a double stitch just there to cast off and then cut off the excess thread. Just make sure you give that little tug just to hold those two bits absolutely together. Back in a minute. Okay, so I've just finished stitching all of mine round, as you can see, and I've just cinched that in quite nicely and followed the lines. I've left my red pins in for now, just so that it reminds me just to start and stop. The tacking thread should remind me of that as well, but just to be on the safe side, then I've left those in for now. So I'm going to get my machine sewn ready with the correct colour thread, and I'll be ready to stitch this together. Okay, so machine's got the correct colour thread in. I'm going to take my my needle across to the left because I want to just be right on the edge of here, and so that I find that works really well. So you may be able to adjust the position of your needle on your machine. So on mine, I can then go down to my position. It's at 3.5 at the moment. If I take it down to 0, then that will have the needle right in the furthest left-hand side of the sewn position. And then I'm going to take my stitch length as well down to a stitch length of 2, which is the one that Claire suggests we sew with. So I'm going to then position my fabric under my presser foot, take my pin out right on that very edge, and then I'm going to just lower my needle down to make sure that it's in the right place. And I can see that it is, so I've got a button on my machine that I can use, which will always then keep my needle in my work. You might need to use the hand crank on the side of your machine just here, just to move your needle up or down. So whichever you need to use, then that's fine. And then finding my foot pedal, we're going to take a couple of stitches forward and a couple of stitches back, just to start us off and anchor those threads. I'm also going to use my awl, which is this pointed tool here, which is great just for helping manipulate the fabric and keeping it flat. So then once we've got that sorted, we can just start and take our time, and we're sewing right on top of the drawn line. And once we get to a certain point, we can see that we need to move the fabric. So we're going to leave our needle in our work, lift up our presser foot, and then we can move our fabric wherever we need to because it's anchored down by the needle. But we're just going to move it to the correct position for the next couple of stitches and take the next couple of stitches so we can stay right on that line. And then when it starts to look like it's going to veer off again, needle in the work, lift your presser foot up and just do a couple more stitches around the top here. And you can just by taking your time slowly and gently, you can then start to manipulate the fabric round and the felt round as you need to. And this is a great technique. It's called pivoting, and we use that a lot on collars, sleeves, bodices, anything where we've got a tight curve. We can then use that then just to stop the fabric from bunching up, and it's much better for your fabric than trying to pull it all the time and possibly pull it out of shape. So let's keep going. It's quite a small stitch, so it would just take a little while to get round. So a bit more pivoting here to come around the section here. Ooh, a bit faster. And again, just manipulate your fabric around and pivot where you need. Sometimes on a gentle curve, you don't need to pivot quite so much, but if you see your fabric bunching up, either before or after to the side, that's the time that you're being told that you need to pivot really. So I can see my fabric starting to bunch up here, so if I lift up the presser foot and just change the angle, then we'll get round much better, much neater and smoother. And the more often you change direction and the smaller amount you change direction, the better it is, because otherwise it can get a bit jagged, your edge can do, if you try and change direction too much in one go. We're coming back round this last section round here. Keep yourself on your drawn line. coming up towards the pin, and we'll remember to stop. So let's take that pin out now. Don't sew over pins because it can mess our machines up. And get up to where that knot is, and then we can just reverse stitch just there, a couple of stitches back. Needle out of the work, press the foot up, and let's take off our threads and see how we've done. We should be okay, hopefully. So here's my stitching on one side, and there's my stitching on the other. So at the top here I've gone off slightly there, so I'm on the line there but gone slightly off there, but that's where the head's going to be attached, so I'm not going to worry too much about that bit, but everything else is fine. So once we've done that, we can then use our quick unpick to remove our tack-in threads. So I'm just going to take out those yellow tack-in threads. And remembering what I said before, if you've pierced your tack-in thread with your needle, then you may need to just snip off your thread close to where it's caught, and then you'll be able to then ease that out. So like there, I've got mine caught. Take it out one side and then it should pull out through the other just gently. That's it. Try not to pull too much, you might have to snip it off instead, because if you pull too much you do run the risk of damaging your sewn line. And if you do snap the sewn line, just go back and just reinforce that area with another row of stitches. You don't need to go all the way around, just a little way before and after the damaged section will usually suffice. Okay, I'm going to carry on taking out this tack-in thread. If you do the same, make sure you don't catch your sewn line by mistake, and then I'll come back to you for the turning. Okay, so we've got all of our tack-in threads out. You might find a little stray little bit every now and again, but we'll pick those out. As I said before, if you've not got nails, you can always use tweezers to try and pull those bits out. And then before we actually do turn this around, I'm going to use my pinking shears, which is the ones with the zigzag blade here. They can sometimes be called crimping shears, and I'm going to not cut or trim off the seam allowance on the back here. I'm just going to start just where that red pin was before, and I'm just going to halve the seam allowance following the curves of my stitch line, because this will help the fabric all stay straight and turn through nicely when we come to turn it through. Help those seams bend and not be too bulky. So back up again to here, but I'm not going to trim, as I said, where the edge is, so just trim that off there. So keep that, so you can see I've got a flat bit there, which is between where my hole is. If I just put my finger in there so you can see, that's where my hole is to get inside to turn everything round, but I've pinked all the way around the rest of it. And then the next thing that we need to do then, and I find that the best thing to do is to pull apart your two sides of your body and then tuck that bottom in, and then aim that for the hole that you've got in the section just here. It's quite a small hole, but you should be able to aim that for there, and then you should be able to pinch through and pull on that little section there. You should be able to then, because try not to stretch that opening too far. It should, all the fold should just fold inside on itself. So try not to stretch too much. And this is why we have to reinforce those stitches just in before and after we have that body opening, just so that we can turn this all through. And it's got some, whoops, it's got some pressure on the stitches. So we can just pull this all through. Just push it where you can, that's usually a good way of doing it. Pushing rather than pulling tends to not stretch the felt quite so much. And then we can put our finger inside and start to ease out all of these little curves. Oh, what a cute little body she's got. Oh, that's tiny, isn't it? Okay, so there's her shaping, all lovely. And so the next thing we're going to do now is reach for our stuffing, and then we're going to stuff this. Okay, so we've got our stuffing and we've got our character here. You can either break bits off in a little handful, or you can just use it from the clump. and you'll be surprised how much these little characters take. You can buy stuffing filling from craft shops as well. This one's from a cushion company, because I live in Spain and it's not quite so easy to get all of the materials that I need over here. So this has worked really well, and as I said before, my character is not for a toy, so I don't have to be careful of what the stuffing that goes into it is. It's just going to sit on in my sewing room and look at me, which is going to be lovely. Right, and if anybody wants a tour of my sewing room, I have got videos on my channel with a before and after view of my sewing room when I go through what supplies I've got, so you can have a look at that if you wanted. And also I've got dressmaking videos as well, so the dress I'm wearing is a dress that I made. So if you're interested in that, I've got some children's dungarees on as a sew along, and I will be adding more sew along videos in time. Oops. Yeah, and I have got quite a lot of videos already on the lunar lapping dolls, because I have made quite a few of those. So if you're interested in those, you can have a look at those too. So let's get this really filled out, nice and firm. Might need a bit more, I think. So again, we're trying to put in quite a lot of stuff in because we want our characters to be really nice and firm. And because these characters stand as well, then we need to have enough that that's going to stand and hold that body, and it's going to hold the head, because the head is going to sit on top like this when she's on there. So we need to get that all nice and right. So let me just get some more stuffing. The other thing that you can do, which is a really sweet idea, let me just get that and I can show you what I'm gonna say about these. I do this with my lunar lapping characters sometimes. So let me just get my supplies and I'll show you what I do. So part way through the stuffing, I'll stop and I'll get a little bit of my red felt, and then I will fold it in half. Gently, and then I'll cut out a heart shape, so I cut out a little heart shape, and then I put that inside my characters. So I think it's always nice for them to have a little heart. And then I also picked up a little ink stamp pad like this and some letters. So this one, you can't get this brand anymore, which is Colourbox. There's a different brand, but it's especially for fabric. And then I use my little letters. I'm going to type the word love on this one. So let's just do that. And a little scrap of, it's just like calico. Just make sure you've got your letters the right way round. And again, you don't have to do this. I just think that when we're hand making something, you can take that time just to do whatever you want to do with your characters. But I've put in believe, I've put in dream, I've put in achieve, I've put in I love you. You know, lots of different things like that we can put in. So then I just use my pinking shears and just trim off any excess for that. So that's our little word of affirmation there. And then that just goes inside as well. Then I just carry on stuffing it. Just make sure you've got your sides available to you, and make sure you make that neck edge right at the top very, very stiff, because we want to be having that nice and firm to attach our character onto. Just be careful you're not overstuffing, and there is going to be a fine line, but if you feel like you're overstuffing it out of shape, then stop, because you want your clothes to fit, and the clothes will have been designed for a certain circumference of the body, and so we don't want to over stretch that. Okay, so that's kind of feeling quite nice for mine. If you can see, that's quite stiff. in all of the parts. Make sure you've got down into the bottom there and up into the top. And then you just want to pull your seam allowance out a little bit so that we can see where that is. We've got to guesstimate roughly where the edge of that seam allowance is, because we're going to now stitch that together. So make sure you've got your shape and you're happy with it. It's a nice firm neck, so that's good. Let me put my ink away and get my needle and thread ready, and we'll close this up with a ladder stitch. Okay, so I've got my thread here all ready. I'm going to have my thread double, so let's go to put the two ends together and do our quarters knot. Okay, so when I'm sewing mine together, I'm going to use something called a ladder stitch, and it might be the first time you've seen this. So what you do is, I'm going to come up with I've got a knot in my thread. I'm going to come up just a couple of stitches before the opening through the seam allowance, just to hold on to that thread. Just indent your character out of the way if you need to, just by pushing your thumb or your finger into it. So there's my raw edges going on the inside of the ends of my thread, and I'll do a little couple of stitches just in place on that seam allowance, just to anchor that thread down. But I kind of do it, if you look where my thread's coming out here, it's just before the opening, so there's no pressure on that stitch on that point. And then I'm going to take a stitch forward towards the edge, and I'm ready to start. So you do have to indent some of your stuffing in, just to so that you can see where your seam edge of your character body is. And then I take a stitch out of one side of the felt, just a small stitch, and then I go across to the other side and I take a stitch out of this other side as well. So can you see how the thread is spanning over the gap? Now I go back to the other side and I take a stitch out of the seam allowance. So you're just trying to guesstimate that seam allowance all the way up. You can see how the thread is stitching across again, spanning that gap, and then another stitch again. And then what you can do is, if you can see those threads across there, is when you pull it, it cinches that closed. So now I've finished on this side, so now I'm back over to this side again. So let's take a stitch there. You've got to try and go through your felt, because if you just grab a few fibres, you're not going to have enough of your seam allowance to grip onto. So again, make sure you're going through your felt. And you can do 5 or 6 stitches from side to side before you have to cinch in. That's what I've found anyway. So there's my 5 or 6 stitches, and then I pull on my thread, and just like magic it closes it up. Just keep pushing your stuffing in out of the way, because you don't want that to be poking out. You can use the end of your needle just to get that in. So finish this side, so let's go back over to this other side. Make sure you go through. I'm just going to do that all the way up. So again, pull it in and cinch it. I don't worry about these little whiskers out of the stuffing. We'll sort that out in a minute. Just push your stuffing in with your needle if you need to, so you can see where your stitches need to go. Another stitch that side. Try not to have too far between your stitches, because you're trying to mimic the machine stitches. Just push that stuffing in, cinch it up, and then as we started just a couple of stitches into the machine stitching, we're going to finish that same way too. So I'm going to take my stitching back up and past, oops, and just up into the machine stitching a couple of stitches, just so that it anchors those threads down. And the more you do this stitch, the neater you get. So that's my first pass through. You can see all the whiskers of the stuffing. So if you want to, if you hold your sewing thread out of the way, you can take your scissors and you can just give your characters back a little bit of a shave, and it'll just, using your snip saw scissors close to the felt, you'll just take off those fluffy fibres. So we've got a couple of stitches here, just anchoring that first run of stitches, and then generally I then go back down again and try and just get some more stitches to hold that all together, but you're just trying to keep it looking nice and neat. And then I'll cast and I try and put my stitches in between the other stitches, so if I can see that there's a stitch going a certain way, then I'll do another stitch just to hold that together in between. Again, it depends on how big your stitches are. So that's how mine's looking. A little bit of a mark there, but not too bad otherwise. And then coming down here, back over to where the machine stitching is. And I'm just going to do a few stitches to hold that together. Oops, that's gone over the thread. Let me just take that out. Go, and then we can just do a few back stitches just along that sewn edge just to anchor that thread down. We've got 2 rows of stitching, so it shouldn't come undone. And then again, I'm going to bury put the needle into my character. Make sure you can see where it's coming out first before you let go, and then pull on your needle, and that'll give us a nice long thread. Then put pressure on your thread, and it'll pop into your character. So here is our character's body. Quite a strange shape, isn't it? From that variety. So we've got a bit of a bust line here, a bit of a tummy here, and then a bit of a back there for where a tail might be, and that's where the head's going to be. So let me have a look at that. That's all fine, I think, nice and cute. So if you want to grab your head, the next thing we're going to do is sew our head on. Okay. Put some things out the way. So I've got our body and we've got our head. Let's just offer our head up onto our body, and the centre front going down the front of the tummy. So if you look at the shape of this character here, this is the tummy, and that's the rear end, the bottom, and that's where the head's going to go on the top. So we've got a centre front seam down the front of our character's head, and we're going to just sort of squish the point of the top of the body into the top of the character, and we want that centre line there. If you just hold it with your finger on top, just be careful of the pins holding the ears on. Then I'm going to get a pin. I'm going to take a little bit out of the head, going to go through that match point on the body and then come out the other side of the head. So can you see I've got that point there matched onto that point just there. Let's go to the back as well. So the back of the head gusset is going to match the back of the centre seam. So let's do that again. So out of the head, one side of the gusset, through the body, on one side of the seam. Oops. Just hold it together. And then back up into the body again. Might get a couple of bent pins in the process. That's about right. Okay, holding on to that. And that's how Clara's looking at the moment. So we want to make sure she's kind of facing the right way and straight. And we can adjust her, a bit of a twist on her body at the moment, probably the way I've stuffed it. To get her, those lines need to match. It will get hidden by the ribbon from her bonnet, but we want it to be as straight as possible. Right, and I'm not happy with that back bit, so let's just get that back bit a bit better. And again, just with the face, it's just until trial and error until you're happy again that everything's right. So that's okay there. That's okay there. And just make sure that when you look at her from a distance, she's kind of straight, because you want her to be straight in the way that she is. The ears are slightly, are only pinned on, so they'll be adjusted. Okay, so once you're happy with that, you're going to get your needle and thread, and I've got it double this time because we're holding on to quite a lot of pressure, aren't we, holding the head on, and I've put a knot at the very end. So the first thing I'm going to start and finish at the back of the neck, because that's going to be hidden most by the clothes. So I'm going to go in underneath where we're going to sew, and then come out, watching out for the pins, right on the neck edge. So that's just burying my knot just up inside that neck area. And then I'm going to we're on the body at the moment, I'm going to take a bite out of the head first, only. It's a bit like a ladder stitch again. So I've just taken a bite out of the head, and now I'm going to take a bite out of the body. And at this stage, it's quite difficult to be delicate. So don't worry about that. At the moment, we're just worrying about trying to get things attached in the right sort of area. So out of the head again, stitch out of the head, stitch out of the body. I don't try and do both stitches at the same time. It takes a little bit longer, but I think you'll get a better result if you try that. So stitch out of the head, stitch out of the body, and just try and keep in that neck crease if you can do, just to attach all that together. And then a stitch. It's quite big stitches, you'll notice as well at this moment in time. Stitch out of the head and one out of the body. Move my hand so you can see. Stitch out of the body. So just going right in that neck crease, then stitch out of the head, and then stitch out of the body. Just jump in that seam allowance there, and the head's twisted slightly, so let me just adjust that. Stitch out of the head. Make sure you go through the felt, don't just grab a few little fibres, you need to go right into your felt. And then stitches out of the head. I'm just going to do that all the way around, making sure that these reference points are right. And once you've kind of got those reference points right, we're kind of attached on a little bit, look, by my big stitches. But when I cinch that in, that's going to sit on nicely. So let's carry on round. So I was last out of the head, so this time out of the body. And this time out of the head, till we get back to where we were. This time out of the body. And we'll fine tune it in a minute. We just need to get this so that it's sort of, we're almost tacking it on with this first go round. So let's take that back stitch off there. Make sure your back gusset is right so that you're straight in the middle of there, look. And then just go back just past where you started from. And then have a little look. So I'm slightly off at the front, but I'll neaten that up next time. And give things a little tug, just to make sure that's nice and straight. And give your character a wobble. You don't want your head to be lolling to one side. You want it to be self-supporting. And then once you're happy with that, we're going to go round again and just fine tune it. So I'll show you what I do here, because if you look, my neck edge, my neck seam isn't quite perfect just there. But I'll show you how we fine tune it. At the back I'm happy with it, because the two seams going down are going into that centre one. So again, out of the head, almost on the same stitching line, and then out of the body. Then through the head. And you're just trying to go in between the stitches that you've already done, if you can. A little bit difficult to see sometimes. And you're trying to just kind of hold those stitches together. But I do find that this works quite well, and it gives you quite a neat finish in the end. Just keep stitching round, give it a little tug every now and again. That's getting nicer and firmer. Right, so we're going back to the front here, where we need to just adjust this slightly. Well, I need to adjust it, you may not, yours may be perfect straight away. It's always different when you're doing it on video, because you're trying to think of so many different things. Okay, so now I'm going to go through the seam allowance on that neck point. And then I'm just going to put the head, just slight bit of twist on it before I take my next stitch on this side of this head, and that will hopefully pull that head straighter, and it has done, look, just pulled it straighter. So back out of the body, and I'll probably go round 3 times, I think, just to make sure that mine's absolutely in the right place. And I'm just burying my needle now into the neck crease, and I can see I've got quite a big stitch there, look, so I can take one in the halfway through in the middle, and then that will just help keep everything all together. And it is just a trial and error going round and round and round. But yeah, she's looking okay, isn't she there, look? Looking nice now. So we've got that centre bit there. So if you wanted to, you can cast off now if you want to. We're at the back, and I'd just do a few back stitches in place through either the body or just through the neck edge of the head, and then I will bury my thread either through the head or through the body to give it a long tail again. I think I'm going to go around just once more on mine, but that head's really quite stiff. It's not wobbling to side, it's not going to flop, and because it's got to have the weight of the bonnet on it as well. So I mean, I know the bonnet's not going to weigh too much, but we've still got to account for that, haven't we, in what she's wearing, and then we'll be ready for making the next step. So let me just carry on with that, and I'll come back to you when I've finished. Okay, all finished for now. So I'm going to leave it there, and I will join you again next time. And we'll be making should we make the arms next? Let's make the arms next, and then we'll then go on to making our legs. Hope you've enjoyed watching today and stitching along with me. If you've enjoyed the video, I'd really appreciate it if you would click the like button for the video, and if you want to leave me a comment on how you think I'm doing so far with this character, or if you've struggled with any part of it, then please just leave me a comment and let me know. Okay, happy stitching everybody, and I'll speak to you soon. Bye.